The MUDSHARK incident is the most famous and famously debauched moment in rock and roll, but the truth is much more shocking than you think. Welcome, classic rock fans, to a short video which shines some light upon a pretty dark moment in rock history. If you're new to this channel, please do click like, subscribe and check that notification bell as Steven Tyler sings so you don't miss a thing. And check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work done. A classic album review is always much appreciated. Well, the whole groupie scene in the 1960s and 70s has been written about fairly extensively, but this bit of Led Zeppelin lore has often baffled, bemused and disgusted in equal measure. My research has been pretty extensive, looking across the internet and various other publications, but the main source has to be Carmine Appice's wonderful book, Stick It, My Life of Sex, Drums and Rock and Roll. Carmine Appice writes that he picked up this girl on the way to a gig in Seattle, and she proceeded to show her appreciation immediately. In fact, he writes, "I can't remember her name, but I can still picture those big blowjob lips, and she gave me the best time it is humanly possible to have in a car driving through Seattle." Of course, this was prior to the Seattle Pop Festival in 1969, often known as the Forgotten Woodstock. The lineup included Led Zeppelin, the Byrds, Bo Diddley, the Flying Burrito Brothers, Tim Buckley, the Guess Who, Santana, Ike and Tina Turner, Vanilla Fudge, Alice Cooper and the Chicago Transit Authority. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the Doors played there as well, but I wouldn't bet me mortgage on it. The bands were staying at the Edgewater Hotel in Seattle, and the bands, Led Zeppelin, Vanilla Fudge and their various road crew managers, were all getting wasted, I think in John Paul Jones's room. Carmine Appice describes the hotel as nothing special: a couch, a TV, standard issue flowery curtains and a matching bedspread. And they were drinking wine, smoking pot and listening to music when there was a knock on the door. And guess who? It was the girl from the limo, but this time she was wearing short-cut jeans, a flowery see-through chiffon blouse and no bra. Mark Stein, Vanilla Fudge's keyboardist and vocalist, told the girl he had camera equipment with him. And the girl was rather intrigued by this and replied, "I want to make a movie with you guys," rather enthusiastically. Who knows, maybe she was obviously a budding thespian. But it was what was happening in the adjacent room that was rather interesting. In the adjacent room you had John Bonham, you had Richard Cole, Zeppelin's tour manager, Zepp roadie Clive Colson and Bruce Wayne, which I believe was Vanilla Fudge's tour manager. And they were completely wasted and fishing out of the hotel window because apparently in the bathtub there were several specimens they'd pulled out of the water, including the offending MUDSHARK. And these guys all came bursting into the room where the young lady was, and Mark Stein was ready with his camera. And according to Carmine Appice, it was carnage. Richard Cole and Bruce Wayne were the ringleaders and asked the girl to take her clothes off and display herself, shall we say. And the offending MUDSHARK, of course, was employed. Carmine Appice says in his book, "I said, what the fuck are you going to do with that?" Apparently Richard Cole started whipping the girl with the fish until she was MUDSHARKed into submission. And it was then that Richard Cole and Bruce Wayne decided to insert said fish. To quote from Carmine Appice's book once more, he said, "The shark was right up in the girl, its tail was flailing between her thighs." Puts a whole new spin on the phrase Finding Nemo, doesn't it? But it was then the hotel manager, who was alerted by the amount of noise coming from the room, burst in and was kind of shocked at the scene that was spreading, no pun intended, before him. I think he said something like, "You're all fucking crazy and stop it now." And apparently everybody dispersed. And John Paul Jones and Tim Bogart went to Carmine Appice's room, where apparently they ordered crumpets and English tea. How civilised of them. Then eventually there came another knock on that door, and guess who? It was the MUDSHARK girl. But she'd obviously washed and clean, showered, and she was wearing John Paul Jones's bathrobe. And rather unpleasantly, John Paul Jones, and I'm quoting once more from Carmine Appice's book, he said, "Get that dressing gown off, you bitch. I don't want your slutty germs on it." How lovely. But then Richard Cole and Bruce Wayne barged their way into the room, and the party began afresh. They actually had a fishing pole which they were intent on inserting. It was Carmine Appice's intervention here that suggested the fishing pole was far too brutal, and why not look towards the condiment bottle that was apparently in the room at the time. A bottle of ketchup, would you have it? But this young woman seemed to be perfectly game for it really, and began pleasuring herself with the said bottle, as well as entertaining various managers and roadies that were in the room with her. And Richard Cole started whipping her with his belt, and she was apparently enjoying that. She obviously had masochistic tendencies as well as a thing for marine life. But it was then that things got ugly, or uglier, I should say, when Richard Cole decided to take a piss on the girl, then followed that up with a huge dump on her chest, which Carmine Appice describes as descending on her in a big sloppy thud. Apparently, Carmine Appice ran into Frank Zappa at the airport and told him the whole MUDSHARK story of what had gone down at the Edgewater Hotel, or the Edgewater Inn, I should say. A couple of years later, his next record, Fillmore East, June 1971, had a song called The MUDSHARK that related the whole sordid tale.
That's right, you heard right. The secret word for tonight is MUDSHARK. The origins of the MUDSHARK are as follows. There's a motel in Seattle, Washington.
Some say that this tale was apocryphal, but Carmine Appice says it happened, and I was there at a front row seat, he says. Apparently many years later there was a chap named Randy Pratt, and yes, you cannot make this stuff up. Maybe he's related to Biggest Dickus, who knows. But apparently he bought the Super 8 film that Mark Stein had shot. When he developed it, the film was so old, there was just nothing there. I think maybe a blessing in disguise that this footage doesn't exist. Apparently, as regards the identity of the girl, they're not really sure who she is, but Carmine Appice said she was on a radio show many, many years later, and the girl actually walked in. Apparently she moved to Alaska, raised a family, lived happily ever after. But Carmine Appice insists that, believe it or not, she was actually a nice girl. I must admit I've read quite a few books, rock star biographies, that go into some fairly explicit details about what was going on. And there's a part of me that finds all this salacious stuff rather titillating. But there's a big part of me that finds it quite depressing as well, and rather sad. But I suppose that part of me is the 50-year-old man that's raising 2 daughters. Anyway, there you have it. If you've enjoyed this video, please do share it, like, subscribe, check that bell. I think I've said that, haven't I? Other than that, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is, as you know, hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.